The morning mist clung to Windridge Ranch like a promise waiting to be broken. Among the elite gathering to showcase their prized horses stood Isabella Carter, her laughter sharp as crystal when she spotted the working man and his daughter approaching. "If you can ride this wild horse," she announced, gesturing to the untamed stallion that had thrown every professional rider, "I'll marry you." The crowd erupted in mockery, but Ethan Miller, standing there in his worn boots with 7-year-old Lily's hand in his, felt something stir that had been dormant for years. Isabella Carter commanded attention the way storms commanded the sky, naturally, inevitably, and with devastating effect. At 34, she had built an empire from her father's struggling company, transforming it into a billion-dollar corporation through sheer will and ruthless intelligence. Her golden hair fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, and her blue eyes could freeze or burn depending on her mood. This morning, standing beside the paddock in her designer riding outfit that cost more than most people's monthly salary, she was holding court among her usual admirers. The Windridge Ranch annual exhibition was where Colorado's elite came to parade their wealth disguised as equestrian passion. Champagne flowed at 10 in the morning, and conversations revolved around stock portfolios and vacation homes in Aspen. Isabella thrived in this environment, where power was currency, and she was extraordinarily wealthy. Ethan Miller existed in a different universe entirely. At 36, he worked at Henderson's farm 10 miles away, training horses for enough money to keep a roof over his daughter's head and food on their table. His hands bore the calluses of honest work, his face carried lines earned from sun and sorrow, and his storm-gray eyes held depths that most people never got close enough to explore. He had brought Lily to watch the exhibition because she loved horses with the pure passion only children could muster, even though he could never afford the lessons she deserved. Lily Miller was 7 years old and believed in magic, despite life having given her plenty of reasons not to. She had her late mother's delicate features but her father's unbreakable spirit. Her second-hand riding jacket was carefully mended, her boots polished despite being 2 sizes too big hand-me-downs from the Henderson children. She bounced beside her father, her dark curls escaping from beneath her riding helmet, eyes bright with excitement at seeing the beautiful horses. The ranch stretched out before them like a painting of privilege. White fences gleamed in the morning sun, and the main house rose like a mansion from a fairy tale. Thoroughbreds worth more than houses pranced in the paddocks, their coats gleaming like polished mahogany and obsidian. The parking area was filled with vehicles that cost more than Ethan would earn in a lifetime: Bentleys, Ferraris, Range Rovers with custom paint jobs. Isabella noticed them immediately. How could she not? They stood out like a deliberate insult to the careful curation of wealth surrounding her. The father in his faded jeans and work boots, the daughter in her obviously second-hand clothes, both of them gazing at the horses with a wonder that seemed almost offensive in its sincerity. She felt her lips curve into a smile that her business rivals would have recognized as dangerous. "Look, Daddy," Lily whispered, tugging on Ethan's hand. "That black one looks like thunderclouds." Ethan followed her gaze to the stallion in the center paddock. "Midnight thunder," the signs proclaimed. 17 hands of pure, untamed power. His coat so black it seemed to absorb light. The horse paced his enclosure like a caged storm, muscles rippling, eyes wild with an intelligence that had nothing to do with domestication. Even from a distance, Ethan could feel the animal's rage at being confined, displayed, treated as a challenge rather than a living being. "Well, well," Isabella's voice cut through the morning air like a silver blade through silk. "It seems we have some visitors from the other side of the tracks." She sauntered over, her entourage trailing behind like expensive accessories. "Are you lost? The public paths are clearly marked. This area is for registered participants only." Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. "We have day passes, ma'am. Purchase them at the gate." Isabella's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "Day passes? How? Quaint. Tell me, what exactly does someone like you do for a living?" "No. Wait. Let me guess." She made a show of studying him, her gaze deliberately insulting. "You work with horses, don't you? But not in any meaningful way. You're the one who cleans up after them, aren't you?" A stable hand? The group behind her laughed on cue, the sound harsh and hollow. Lily pressed closer to her father, her excitement dimming. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood the tone. The way these people looked at them, like they were something unpleasant that had been tracked in on someone's shoe. "I train horses," Ethan said simply. "There's no shame in any honest work with animals." "Train horses?" Isabella's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "At Henderson's farm? Please. That's barely a step above a petting zoo. I doubt you could handle a real horse, one with actual breeding and spirit." She gestured toward Midnight Thunder, who chose that moment to rear, his hooves slashing at the air. "Take him, for instance. 3 Olympic trainers have tried to ride him this month alone. Professional cowboys, with actual credentials. Not farmhands playing at expertise. Every single one ended up in the dirt within seconds. The stallion was indeed magnificent in his fury. He stood apart from the other horses like a wolf among dogs, his very presence a challenge to anyone who dared look at him. The crowd had gathered to watch him earlier, placing bets on how long various riders would last. The record so far was 12 seconds. "But you know what?" Isabella continued, her smile widening. "I'm feeling generous today. Charitable, even. Since you claim to train horses, I'll make you a deal." She raised her voice so everyone could hear, drawing the crowd's attention like a magnet. "If you can ride Midnight Thunder, really ride him, not just cling on for dear life before being thrown, I'll marry you. Right here, right now. We'll call the chaplain and everything." The laughter that erupted was cruel and confident. Someone actually applauded. Others pulled out their phones, sensing viral content in the making. The idea was so absurd, so impossible, that it had crossed from insulting to entertaining. "Isabella," one of her companions, said through his laughter, "you can't be serious." "Oh, but I am," she replied, her eyes never leaving Ethan's face. "I always honor my word. Though we all know there's no risk here. Men like him are all talk. He'll make some excuse about not having the proper equipment, or the horse not being ready. Or, I'll do it." The words dropped into the chaos like stones into a pond, creating ripples of sudden silence. Isabella blinked, certain she had misheard. The crowd seemed to hold its collective breath. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice slightly higher than intended. "I said I'll do it." Ethan's voice was calm, steady, like bedrock. "You made an offer in front of witnesses. I'm accepting." Lily looked up at her father with wide eyes. "Daddy, that horse is dangerous." Ethan knelt down to his daughter's level, his large hands gentle on her small shoulders. What he whispered to her was too quiet for anyone else to hear, but Isabella saw the change in the child's expression, from fear to recognition, to something that looked like pride, mixed with old pain. "You can't be serious," Isabella said as Ethan stood. "This is ridiculous." It was a joke, obviously. No one would actually. Was it a joke? Ethan interrupted quietly, or was it just another way to remind people like us that we don't belong in your world? Either way, you made the offer. I'm accepting. Unless your word means nothing? The challenge hung in the air between them. Isabella felt the eyes of the crowd on her, recording everything. She had built her reputation on never backing down, never showing weakness. To retract now would be to admit she had been bluffing, playing cruel games with people she considered beneath her. "Fine," she said, lifting her chin. "But when you fail, and you will fail, you leave immediately. No lawsuits, no complaints, no telling anyone. I didn't give you a fair chance, and when I succeed?" Ethan asked. The confidence in his voice made something flicker in Isabella's chest, uncertainty perhaps, or the first whisper of intuition that she had miscalculated badly. "You won't," she said, but the words lacked their earlier conviction. 20 years ago, Ethan Miller had been a name spoken with reverence in rodeo circles. They called him the Ghost Rider. Not because he was invisible, but because he could read horses like others read books. Understanding their fears and furies, their needs and their natures. He had been 17 when he won his first national championship, riding a horse everyone said couldn't be ridden. By 25, he had 3 national titles, dozens of sponsors, and a reputation that preceded him into every arena. But that was before Sarah. She had been a veterinary student, volunteering at a rodeo when they met. She didn't care about his fame or his trophies. She saw past the ghostwriter to the man underneath, the one who spent hours with injured horses, who read poetry in his trailer between events, who wanted something more than the endless circuit of competitions and crowds. They married in a small ceremony in her parents' backyard. Lily came along 2 years later, and Ethan thought his life was complete. He retired from professional rodeo, using his savings to buy a small ranch where they could raise their daughter surrounded by horses and happiness. Sarah had her veterinary practice. Ethan trained horses for local families, and Lily grew surrounded by love and laughter. The accident happened on a Tuesday. Sarah was coming home from an emergency call at a farm 40 miles away. The other driver had been drinking since noon, the police said later. He walked away without a scratch. Sarah died on impact, they assured Ethan, as if the speed of her death could somehow lessen the eternity of her absence. Ethan sold the ranch to pay for the funeral and Sarah's medical school loans. He took the job at Henderson's farm because it came with a small house on the property and asked no questions about his past. He packed away his trophies, his championship buckles, his entire previous life, and focused on the only thing that mattered: raising Lily, keeping her safe, making sure she knew she was loved even if half of her world had vanished in an instant. For 5 years, he had been invisible, just another ranch hand in rural Colorado. The ghostwriter was dead, buried with Sarah, and Ethan preferred it that way. He worked his horses, raised his daughter, and built a life small enough that losing it wouldn't destroy what was left of his heart. But muscles have memory that minds try to forget. Standing there at Windridge Ranch, watching midnight thunder rage against his confinement, Ethan felt something wake up inside him. Not the competitor, not the champion, but something deeper, the part of him that understood wildness, that spoke the language of horses who had been broken by force rather than gentled by understanding. He could see it in the stallion's eyes, the way he held his head, the tension in his shoulders. This wasn't a mean horse or even a truly wild one. This was an animal that had been handled wrong, pushed too hard, treated as a problem to be solved rather than a partner to be earned. The horse's anger wasn't natural. It was learned, taught by humans who mistook dominance for leadership. "Daddy," Lily said quietly, "you don't have to do this. We can just leave." Ethan looked down at his daughter, seeing Sarah in the curve of her cheek, the determination in her small chin. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people need to be reminded that worth isn't measured in dollars. And sometimes, a horse needs to remember that not all humans are the same." He walked toward the paddock with a gait that had changed completely. The quiet ranch hand was gone, replaced by someone who moved with the fluid confidence of absolute competence. The crowd parted before him, their mockery dying as they sensed something shifting in the air. Isabella found herself following, drawn despite herself. "You know you don't have to do this," she said quietly. "I'll say it was a joke. No one will think less of you for walking away." Ethan paused at the paddock gate, looking back at her. For a moment, their eyes met, and Isabella felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with clothing. He was looking at her, really looking at her, and seeing things she had buried under years of ambition and armor. "Yes, they will," he said simply. "They'll think exactly what you wanted them to think, that we don't belong here, that we're less than you, that our presence is something to be tolerated at best and mocked when possible. But more importantly, my daughter will think that her father backed down from a bully. And that's not a lesson I'm willing to teach her." He opened the gate and stepped into the paddock. Midnight Thunder's reaction was immediate and violent. The stallion reared, his hooves cutting through the air like weapons. He screamed a sound of rage and challenge that made several people in the crowd step back. His eyes rolled white, showing the wildness that had defeated every rider who'd tried to mount him. But Ethan didn't approach. He stood just inside the gate, his body relaxed, his breathing steady. He was reading the horse, seeing past the fury to the fear underneath. This was an animal that had been rushed, forced, treated as a conquest rather than a partner. Every rider had approached him with dominance, with the intention to break rather than bond. "That's enough," Ethan said quietly, his voice carrying despite its softness. "I see you. I understand." The stallion pawed the ground, snorting, but his ears flickered toward the sound of Ethan's voice. It was different, from what he was used to. No aggression, no challenge, just acknowledgement. Ethan took a single step forward, then stopped. He was letting the horse make the choice, offering partnership rather than demanding submission. The crowd held its breath. Isabella found herself gripping the fence rail, her knuckles white. Minutes passed like hours. Ethan moved only when the horse's tension eased, stopped when it increased. It was a dance of patience, a conversation in body language that most people had forgotten how to speak. Midnight thunder circled him, testing, evaluating, finding something unexpected in this human who didn't act like the others. When Ethan finally extended his hand, palm down, fingers relaxed, the stallion approached slowly. His nostrils flared, taking in this stranger's scent. There was no fear smell, no aggression smell, just the calm scent of someone who understood horses at a level deeper than training. The first touch was electric. Midnight thunder jerked back, but not in fear and surprise. This hand wasn't trying to control or conquer. It was offering connection. The second touch lasted longer. By the third, Ethan was stroking the stallion's neck, and the horse was allowing it. "My God," someone in the crowd whispered. "He's actually doing it." Isabella watched, transfixed. She had seen professional trainers work with difficult horses, but this was something else entirely. This was communion. A meeting of spirits that transcended species. The man she had mocked as a simple, stable hand was revealing himself to be something extraordinary. When Ethan moved to the horse's side, Midnight Thunder stood still. There was no saddle. Ethan hadn't asked for one, knowing it would only add another layer of unfamiliarity for the already stressed animal. He grabbed a handful of mane, and in one fluid motion that spoke of years of practice, swung himself onto the stallion's back. For a heartbeat, everything was still. The horse, the rider, the crowd, even the wind, seemed to pause. Then Midnight Thunder exploded into motion, and the real test began. The stallion bucked with a violence that should have ended everything in the first second. He twisted his body into impossible angles, jumped straight up, came down hard, spun like a tornado. Dust filled the air, obscuring the battle between man and horse. The crowd screamed, some in excitement, others in horror. But Ethan rode like water over stone. He didn't fight the horse's movements. He flowed with them, becoming part of the animal's kinetic expression, rather than trying to suppress it. His body remembered what his mind had tried to forget: the perfect balance point, the communication through pressure and release, the ancient conversation between human and horse that predated language itself. Midnight Thunder bucked harder, frustrated that this rider wouldn't be dislodged. He ran toward the fence, trying to scrape Ethan off against the rails. He reared high, walking on his hind legs, pawing at the sky. He dropped and rolled, but Ethan was already off and back on before the horse could complete the maneuver. The battle continued for what seemed like an eternity, but was actually about 6 minutes. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, the stallion's fury began to transform. The bucks became less violent, more testing. The spins slowed from desperate to curious. This human wasn't trying to dominate him, wasn't punishing him for his spirit. This human was simply there, present, unshakable but not oppressive. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Midnight Thunder stopped bucking and began to canter around the paddock. His gait was smooth, collected, almost proud. Ethan sat deep and easy, his hand stroking the horse's neck, murmuring words too soft for anyone to hear. The stallion's ears, which had been pinned back in rage, swiveled forward, listening. His breathing steadied. His muscles relaxed. When Ethan guided him back toward the gate where Isabella stood frozen, the horse came willingly. The terror of Windridge Ranch, the stallion that had hospitalized 3 professional riders, was walking calmly with a man everyone had dismissed as nobody. The silence was complete. Even the other horses in nearby paddocks had stopped moving, as if recognizing something significant had just occurred. Then Lily's voice rang out, clear and proud and fierce. "That's my daddy! That's my daddy who just rode that horse." The spell broke. The crowd erupted in chaos, cheering, shouting, demanding to know who this man was. Someone with a phone and good memory shouted, Holy shit, that's Ethan Miller, the Ghost Rider. I thought he was dead. The name rippled through the crowd like wildfire. The Ghost Rider, the champion who had vanished. The legend who had walked away at the height of his fame. Suddenly, the worn boots and calloused hands took on new meaning. This wasn't just some ranch hand. This was rodeo royalty in disguise. But Ethan heard none of it. He swung down from midnight thunder, landing lightly. The stallion, rather than moving away, lowered his head and nuzzled Ethan's shoulder. It was a gesture of trust so complete, so at odds with the horse's reputation, that several people gasped. Ethan looked at Isabella, who stood frozen by the gate. Her perfect composure had shattered completely. Her mouth hung slightly open, her eyes wide with shock and something else, awe, shame, the dawning realization that she had made a terrible miscalculation. "I believe," Ethan said quietly, his voice carrying despite the chaos around them. "You made me a promise, Miss Carter." The crowd pressed closer, phones recording, everyone waiting to see what the billionaire CEO would do. Would she honor her word? Would she find some technicality to escape? Would she laugh it off as the joke she'd intended? Isabella's mind raced. But for once, her quick wit and sharp tongue failed her. She was looking at a man she had dismissed as worthless, who had just done something impossible. But more than that, she was seeing herself reflected in his steady gaze, and she didn't like what she saw. A woman so insulated by wealth and power that she had forgotten basic human decency. A person who drew entertainment from humiliating others. A bully in designer clothes. She started, then stopped. The armor of arrogance she wore like skin had cracked. And through those fissures, something else was seeping in. Shame for her cruelty, wonder at what she'd witnessed, and strangest of all, a pull toward this man who had faced her mockery with dignity and her challenge with grace. The next days passed in a blur of media chaos. The video went viral within hours. Billionaire's bluff, called by mystery horseman. CEO's cruel joke becomes real proposal. The return of the Ghost Rider. Isabella's phone never stopped ringing. Her board of directors called emergency meetings. Her mother threatened to disown her. The stock price of her company fluctuated wildly, as investors tried to figure out what this meant for corporate stability. But Isabella couldn't focus on any of it. She kept replaying that moment when Ethan had looked at her by the gate, seeing through every pretense to the frightened, lonely woman beneath. She had built an empire on being untouchable, but he had touched something in her without even trying. She found herself researching him obsessively. The articles about his rodeo career. The tragedy of his wife's death. His complete disappearance from public life. She watched old videos of his competitions, seeing the same grace and connection with horses that she'd witnessed at Windridge. But more importantly, she saw interviews where he spoke about respect, partnership, and understanding values that seemed foreign to her corporate world. 3 days after the incident, she drove to Henderson's farm. Her Bentley looked absurd among the pickup trucks and farm equipment. She found Ethan in the stables, brushing a mare, while Lily did homework on a hay bale nearby. Neither of them looked surprised to see her. "You came," Ethan said, without looking up from his work. "Did you expect me to? I thought you might." People don't usually seek out those they've humiliated unless something's changed inside them. Isabella stepped into the stable, her designer heels immediately inappropriate for the environment. "I came to apologize." "What I did was cruel and human," Ethan interrupted. "You were being human. Not your best version, but human nonetheless." She watched him work, noting the gentle efficiency of his movements, the way the horse leaned into his touch. "The offer," she said suddenly. "My promise. I know it was a joke, but was it?" He finally looked at her. "Or are you wondering, even a little bit, what if it wasn't?" Isabella felt heat rise to her cheeks. When was the last time she'd blushed? "That's ridiculous. We don't know each other. We're from completely different worlds." "That's true," Ethan agreed, returning to his brushing. "But different worlds sometimes share the same sky." Over the following weeks, Isabella found herself returning to Henderson's farm again and again. She told herself it was to properly apologize, to make amends, to understand what had happened at Windridge. But truthfully, She was drawn to the peace of the place, the simplicity of watching Ethan work with horses, the genuine warmth of Lily's chatter. She learned to muck stalls, discovering that physical labor had a meditative quality she'd never experienced in boardrooms. She helped Lily with homework, finding that explaining math to a 7-year-old required more creativity than any corporate presentation. She ate dinners at their small kitchen table, simple meals that somehow tasted better than anything from 5-star restaurants. "Why do you keep coming back?" Lily asked one evening as they washed dishes together. Isabella considered lying, then decided she was tired of pretenses. "Because being here makes me feel like a real person instead of a title and bank account." "You are a real person," Lily said matter-of-factly. "You're just remembering it." The change in Isabella was gradual but undeniable. She started listening in meetings instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. She learned her employees' names, not just the executives, but the janitors, the security guards, the cafeteria workers. She implemented policies she'd been blocking for years: better family leave, on-site childcare, profit sharing for all levels. Her board was baffled. Her social circle was scandalized. But Isabella found she cared less and less about their opinions. She was discovering something she'd lost long ago: authenticity, connection, the simple joy of being valued for who she was rather than what she owned. 6 weeks after Windridge, she stood in the paddock with Midnight Thunder. The stallion, now gentle with those he trusted, carried her carefully around the arena while Ethan walked beside them. "You're different," Ethan observed. "So are you. Less shadows in your eyes. Maybe we're both remembering who we used to be before life convinced us to be someone else." Isabella dismounted, standing close to him in the afternoon light. The question she'd been carrying for weeks finally found voice. "What are we doing, Ethan? This thing between us, what is it?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. But I know that when you're here," Lily laughs more. "And when you're here, I remember that not all people with money are cruel. And when you're here, you seem happy in a way that has nothing to do with power or wealth." "I am happy," she admitted, the words feeling foreign but true. "Happier than I've been in years." "But Ethan, that promise I made was meant as mockery, I know. What if I don't want it to be anymore?" The words hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Ethan went very still, his gray eyes searching hers. "Isabella, marriage isn't something you do because of a challenge or a viral video or even attraction. It's a choice you make every day to put someone else's happiness alongside your own, to build something together that's stronger than what you could build alone." "I know that now," she said softly. "You and Lily have taught me that. But Ethan, I'm asking badly. Probably if you think we could try. Not because of what I said at Windridge, but because of everything that's happened since. Because when I'm with you and Lily, I'm the person I want to be, instead of the person I became." Before he could respond, Lily appeared at the gate, having escaped from her art class. "Are you two going to kiss now? Because that's what happens in all the movies." Ethan laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Life isn't a movie, sweetheart." "No," Isabella agreed. "It's messier and harder and more surprising." She looked at Ethan, her heart hammering. "But maybe that's what makes it worth it." She stood on her toes and kissed him softly. A question more than a statement. When she pulled back, Ethan's eyes held an answer. "This won't be easy," he warned. "The media, your world, my past." "Nothing worth doing is easy," Isabella interrupted. "You taught me that when you got on that horse." They were married 8 months later. Not because of a promise made in mockery, but because of a choice made in love. The ceremony was small, held in the same paddock where it all began. Lily was the flower girl and maid of honor and self-appointed wedding planner. Midnight Thunder wore a bow tie, which he tolerated with patient dignity. Henderson's farm workers sat beside billionaire board members, all equally mystified but oddly moved by what they were witnessing. Isabella wore a simple white dress she'd bought off the rack, having discovered that the most beautiful things rarely came with designer labels. Ethan waited for her by the gate where he'd accepted her challenge. But his eyes held no mockery now. Only love, and the promise of a future neither of them could have imagined. "I should warn you," the officiant said quietly before beginning. "I've never performed a ceremony that started with a viral video of the proposal." The small crowd laughed, remembering the moment that had brought them here. Cruel words transformed into something beautiful through courage, patience, and the wild grace of a horse that refused to be broken. Isabella took Ethan's hands, rough and calloused against her manicured fingers. 8 months ago, I stood here and made a mockery of everything that matters. I thought power was about being above others, that worth was measured in dollars, that strength meant never showing vulnerability. You and Lily taught me that real power is lifting others up, that worth is measured in kindness, and that strength is having the courage to change. Ethan squeezed her hands gently. 8 months ago, I was hiding from the world, convinced that keeping my heart small would keep it safe. You and your spectacular mistakes reminded me that life is meant to be lived fully, that second chances are possible, and that sometimes the best things come from the worst beginnings. Lily stood between them, making them a circle rather than a pair. And I learned that sometimes mean people are just sad people who need horses and homework help, and burn spaghetti to remember how to be nice. The laughter was warm and genuine, as they were pronounced husband and wife, as Ethan kissed Isabella while Lily hugged them both. Midnight thunder neighed definitely approval this time. The sun set over Windridge Ranch, painting everything golden, and in that light, it was impossible to tell where one world ended and another began. Later, as guests enjoyed barbecue and dancing in the barn, the new family stood together in the paddock. Isabella, who had once measured her worth in billions, now measured it in the weight of Lily on her hip and the warmth of Ethan's arm around her waist. "Any regrets?" Ethan asked. "Just one," Isabella said, and he raised an eyebrow. "I wish I'd meant it the first time. It would have saved us 8 months. "No," Lily said with the wisdom of 7 years. "Then we wouldn't have the story. And everyone needs a good story." She was right, of course. Some love stories needed to begin with endings, with mockery transformed into meaning, with wild horses and wilder chances. And as the stars came out over Colorado, ancient witnesses to yet another impossible thing made possible, a CEO who had forgotten how to be human, and a ghostwriter who had forgotten how to live, learned that sometimes the worst promises made the best beginnings.